Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. This week on Time&Tell, we have a very special piece in for review. It is the Seiko SZSC003, or as many of its fans know it, the Seiko Monster. Now this is the third generation version of this timepiece, and we're going to break down the review as our typical format always lays out. I'm going to go into history of the company, also talk a little bit more about the history of this specific watch and the Prospect series from Seiko. Then we're going to go into the technical information, dimensions, and just thoughts and feelings on the watch, pros and cons, and then it'll be followed by my final thoughts. So let's get started. Now let's talk a little bit about the history of Seiko. Seiko was founded in 1881 by Kentaro Hattori, who initially opened a watch and jewelry store labeled Kei Hattori in downtown Tokyo. In 1892, he made his first foray into the clock market by making clocks under the brand name Seikosha, which translates to exquisite workmanship in English. Now, following a devastating earthquake in 1924, Seiko was relaunched as Seiko Watch Company, and from there on, they had to suffer tragedy during World War II with the bombing of Japan and Tokyo in particular. They had to modernize their factories in the 60s. Now, Seiko pulled through this time period and to survive and to become a company with many innovations and milestones in the watch world. They invented the first quartz chronograph, and first kinetic watch. But in this video, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the history of Seiko's dive watch family. In the 1960s, with the advent of the Rolex Submariner and its popularity, Seiko needed to come up with an answer for this product gap. So in 1965, they launched the Seiko 6217. It was their first dive watch. Now, this watch was a true innovator of Japanese technology, and Seiko didn't stop there. In 1978, they launched their first quartz diver, or the first quartz diver ever to hit the industry. Again, followed in 1992 with the first kinetic diver. Today's video is going to focus more on the Prospect series of the Seiko Monster, and I'm going to break down a little bit of the history of the Monster as we move forward in the video. Now, getting into the history of the Seiko Monster series, initially launched in late 2000, early 2001, the Seiko Monster featured Seiko's 7S26 movement. Now, while not the best, it was still reliable, and you were getting an automatic watch for a sub $200 price point at the time. This evolved into the next generation, the second gen Monster, which moved up to the 4R36, which introduced hand-winding hackability. And now, the piece that I hold in my hand today is the Seiko third generation Monster. Again, upgraded movement with the 6R15. I want to delve a little deeper into this watch and talk about technical specifications and specifics on the movement itself. Now let's get into specifics on this piece, starting out with dimensions. It sits at 42 millimeters across the face of this dial, a lug width of 20 millimeters, a thickness of 12.5 millimeters, and a lug-to-lug or tip-to-tip of 47.5 millimeters. Now, it sits very well on the wrist, and I know it looks like a large piece, but you can have a 6-inch wrist with the NATO strap all the way to a 7.5-inch wrist, and this should work. I mean, don't let the case and the dial fool you. It's a very nice looking piece, and it's a very compact piece, especially due to the short lug width. Now, let's talk a little bit more about the movement. This Seiko comes with Seiko's 6R15, which is the upgraded 4R36 movement. I really think it's a great value, even though it's raised the price point from the second generation to the third. It has the standard hand-winding hackability that these movements are known for. And if you're not a fan of this, I still think the second gen with the 4R36 is still a great value. I definitely appreciate the upgrade from the 7S26. Although reliable, it is not the most accurate movement compared to these two models. Also, with the addition of hand-winding hackability, meaning that I can actually unscrew this crown, wind the watch, and also pull it out to time set, which will stop the second hand, which allows for timing with, say, an atomic clock, I think it's a great feature that's been added to this watch. Now, the initial models with the 7S26 and 4R36 movement not only had the date function, they also had a day feature. We've lost that in the 6R15, but we've gained this Cyclops, where I know some people are not the biggest fans of it, which included myself. I've grown to get accustomed to it and appreciate it. It's a solid piece, and I think it's coupled with this solid movement. Also, this piece comes with drill lugs, which allows for easy strap interchangeability. I'm a big fan of the dial and the bezel as well. Now, the glass that comes on here is Seiko's Hardalex, which is their proprietary mineral. I know a lot of people are not fans of it, but I've not had any issues with them wearing other Seiko divers, including this one. The bezel itself, it's got this great scalloped edges that align over here that allow for easy turning of this dial, and I don't know if you guys can hear it, it's got this smooth turning function to it. Now this is a great tool for actual application, and Seiko had that in mind in its design. I'm also a fan of how they've engraved these markings into the bezel itself, and I guess they fill it with some kind of coloring. And while we're at it, we were talking about the dial. It's got one of the best looms that I've ever seen. Now, the loom on this watch is like wearing a flashlight on your wrist. And I've walked into areas that have been very dark, and this thing shone like a flashlight. And I know that you Seiko owners out there with dive watches know what I'm talking about. I think it's very impressive for the money that you're paying. So I also want to show you guys the case back of this watch, and it has the classic Seiko Tsunami wave on it, as well as the Prospex logo, which, if you guys don't know, means professional specifications. That's part of their dive watch line. It also has markings here saying it's made in Japan in the 6R15 / the version of the movement. I think this is a very classic piece, and also that we talked about this is a limited edition watch. If you guys can see it, I've read many forums where I can't really confirm or deny it, but they say these numbers here, this is limited edition, 1 of 1,000. But there's nothing in writing from Seiko or any other proof that can prove that. But just based on that fact itself, this number marking back here just shows the designation of that this should be a piece 097 or 97 out of 1,000, supposedly. And another thing, I did change the spring bars out from the standard thick Seiko spring bars to these curved ones, mainly because I was wearing this on a NATO strap, and it just makes it so much easier to thread the strap through this piece. Just wanted to share that with you guys as well. So let's go over pros of this piece. You know, the first thing I have to say is I'm a fan of the upgraded movement from the 4R36 to the 6R15. Again, a lot of people may not see the value in it, but I do think that it's a slightly better movement, and I do like the option of having the option of going to this movement versus the second gen, which is still available. Also the dial. I like the fact that they changed the indices from the shark teeth that they had in the second generation back to the square indices that they have on this one and the first. I think it just makes it look a little easier on the eyes. That's just my personal thoughts. Also, this watch came with this bracelet. Now, while not the best, it's for the money you're paying, it's not a bad value. And you guys can see it's got the diver's extension clasp to it. It's a solid piece. It doesn't really rattle. It comes with solid end links, and I think as a tool watch, it's a great feature to have. Now let's get into cons of this piece. There's not many per se. I mean, I know I talked about the Cyclops on the dial, and I could have done without it, but it doesn't really bother me anymore, and that's just a minor gripe. Other than that, there's not much for me to say negative about this watch. And I mean, the other thing I could say is, and it's not really a negative, is this is just more of a weekend watch, and it's not something I could wear to the office unless it's, you know, a casual day. It's just, you know what you're getting into when you're buying this. This is not a day-to-day wear. This is more of a weekend warrior watch, as I mentioned earlier. And there you guys have it. That was my review of the Seiko SZSC003 limited edition blue dial Seiko Monster. I hope you guys enjoyed this review, and as always, feel free to share it, and please feel free to hit the subscribe button below, and stay tuned for more videos from Time&Tell. Take care, guys.